Okay, so I'm recording the lecture, and so therefore, when I'm done lecturing, I will I will save it and I'll post it onto Canvas, so that way you can go back and listen to the lecture. That being said, I do think it's really important, even though this obviously it's a Zoom lecture. It's obviously not the same thing as being in a class. I do think that if you come to these Zoom lectures that we're going to meet every Wednesday, I think you'll actually perform better than if you don't attend the Zoom lectures. I don't make my I don't make attendance mandatory for the most part. The reason being is because I see you all as adults, and you're in college, you're paying for this, and if you want to attend, then that's awesome. And if you don't want to attend, well, it's your money, and that's awesome too. And you can always hear the lectures on Canvas. Although, again, I think that if you do attend the actual lecture, I think you will actually not think. I know you will do better in class. Um, for whatever reason, I think something gets lost even if you watch it on video. So, anyways, welcome. Let's see my chats. Okay, awesome. What else was I going to say before I start? I don't have a copy of the book. I just have a digital copy of the book. But please make sure that you get a copy of the book. If you have a friend who took the class last semester, get that book, you know, or rent it from them. If you want to rent the book, you probably should do that, because I do ask lots of questions from the book. So if you want to earn a good grade on the quizzes and on the exams, you need to get a hold of that book. Let's see what else was I going to say before I start. The other thing to remember is the quizzes and the exams are uh, multiple choice. Obviously, because everything's online, it's obviously open book. What am I going to do? Saying that don't open it, and then obviously I don't know what you're doing. So it's obviously open book and open everything. So um, that being said, you do need to take good notes, and because you don't take good notes, you will probably perform poorly. Um, and so some of the questions will be pretty straightforward, you know, not tricky at all, just asking you for the correct answer. And some of the questions will be, which one of the following is false? And so that usually trips students up. So you do need to actually take pretty good notes. So when that question pops up of which one of the following is false, you'll be able to point it out fairly quickly. Um, what else? General rule of thumb, I say in any, since this is a principal's class, I don't know how many of you are transfer students or how many of you are have been here since the start. Been here meaning at Fullerton. So generally speaking, the rule of thumb for if you want to perform well in any class is that you want to spend at least 2 to 3 hours for every hour of lecture studying. So I will post up your lectures on Monday, probably even Sunday, so you can review them before we actually meet on Wednesday, which will be a continuation of wherever I left off on Monday. And so you do want to spend some time reviewing the lectures. We are going to move quickly throughout the semester, and those weekly quizzes, right, will come back to bite you if you keep forgetting to take them. And so my best advice for you is don't procrastinate. Spend, uh, whatever, I don't know how many free hours you have throughout the day, but you should spend at least 5 hours of studying in this class if you want to perform well. Um, Please don't be the type of student who sends me an email telling me that you're stressing out and that you're spending countless hours of in this class studying and it's stressing you out. And then, everything can be monitored nowadays, right? You guys do realize this. Big Brother's watching you. So I know exactly who's attending class and I know exactly how much time you're spending in class. So this particular person is telling me her sob story. And turns out, and this is, mind you, week 16 of the class, and she had only spent 7 hours of studying throughout the semester. And she's wondering why she's performing poorly in the class. Well, if you do the math, she's spending less than a half an hour in the studying the class material. So do you think she's going to be doing well? Yes, Maricela, thank you. Yeah, probably not. Most likely not. And so, again, you do want to spend again at least 5 hours. Again, that's a general rule of thumb. Some of you who are brilliant, because this class is by no means, at least in my opinion, not that hard. So I know some students can get away with just studying maybe 2 hours a week and they'll do just fine. And so anyways, you do think about how you study, think about how long it takes you to grasp concepts, and so you want to approach the class in that way if you want to be successful. Some can get away with less studying, but again, the general rule of thumb for college classes is 2 hours, at least 2 hours of studying for every 1 hour of lecture. So do the math, that's 5 hours, but I'm sure probably most of you don't have 5 hours extra to spend on this class, plus 5 hours on another class, and 5 hours on another class, and 5 hours on another class, and 5 hours on another class, plus work 40 hours a week and whatever else you're doing. So, anyways, without further ado, welcome to Company 46. Um, the professor, obviously Professor Puente. Um, and again, please review the syllabus because I didn't go over everything. And so first and foremost, I'd like to just start out with something that's a fairly current picture of the media landscape. It shows the students, just because it's just to give you an idea of the current or the fairly current landscape, but also to point out the fact that, the landscape is changing very quickly, right? It's changing every day. It's changing, it seems like. And so, you know, 5 or 10 years ago, you know, Amazon wasn't really on the list. Um, Facebook, may have been on the list, but not nearly as big as it currently is. Netflix was a small player. AT&T, I mean, might have been a player 10 years ago, but certainly not the size that it's now is now. So the point that I'm trying to make to you is that things change and evolve very quickly within the entertainment industry. And this is why it's always a really good idea if you want to get into media or whatever industry you want to get into, is that you do want to keep up and read the trades. Um, because even our textbook, which isn't even that old, I think it's 20, oh gosh, when was it published? It's either 2017 or 2018. It's probably 3 or 4 years old, but guess what? It's already old in terms of what's going on in the media. So this is why it's important when you have time to read things like Variety or Billboard or Rolling Stone or any of these sort of trade publications, just so you can keep up with what's going on because there's a lot going on within the industry. So, the media conglomerate characteristics. So first and foremost, we have something called horizontal integration. And so some of these media conglomerates, whether it's Disney or whatever, own different types of companies at the same level. So in other words, they might, generally speaking, when I talk for horizontal integration, we're referring to companies that produce content. And it could be either concentrated or non-concentrated diversification. And so what I mean by that is this is an example of concentrated. So concentrated diversification, let's just take iHeartRadio. And so as you can see here, right, iHeartRadio is, I think, still the largest radio network or radio station owner in the country. And as you can see here, they own a lot of different stations within the radio or broadcasting industry. And they're concentrated, meaning in a sense that there's a lot of different types of genres that appeal to all sorts of different types of people. And so the reason that you do concentrated, well, what's the reason why you do concentrated? Let me ask this to all of you that question. Why would a company practice this idea of concentrated diversification?
To take over a certain market.
That could be one reason.
To reach more audiences.
To reach different audiences, correct.
Money.
Anybody
Revenue.
else?
Revenue.
Revenue, of course. The other reason why you do this is let's just say one genre for whatever reason starts to dip for whatever reason. I don't know what happens. Consumer taste changes, right? And so let's just say that you had, I don't know, a station that's centered on 80s music. Let's say like 90, well, it's not on here. Well, let's see. I guess there's not a real good example here, but let's just say you had a station here that centered on 80s music like Jack, right, 93.1. And so turns out over a period of time that, the audience got tired of listening to 80s music for whatever reason. And they were no longer listening to that kind of music. And so advertising revenue starts to dip for that particular genre. And so iHeartRadio says, well, that's fine. I have these other genres that might be popular, and therefore people will listen to these other genres, and it reduces the impact that it's going to have on us economically speaking. So this is one example of concentrated. And so this would be an example of non-concentrated, like the Walt Disney Company. So as you can see here, right, Disney owns all sorts, mind you, this is not even all of them, all sorts of different companies that produce content in all sorts of different industries. And so this would be an example of non-concentrated because they're all over the map, right? And so again, asking you the same question, why would a company practice non-concentrated horizontal integration? Anybody? Why would a company practice non-concentrated horizontal integration? Where they own companies in all sorts of different types of media across the horizon.
Um, I'll go ahead and answer. I think it's just because I guess it's like when you play the game of Monopoly, the more land you own, the more property you have, the more revenue you make. So I feel companies like Disney want to become conglomerates where they could control different areas so they could make enough money. They have their annual passes, their theme parks, streaming services, retail objects. But I feel that big companies like those like Disney, they just kind of want to um, make more revenue. So I think that more power, um, it creates more of a reputable company.
Sure. Anybody else? It's a really good answer.
It's
So yes, that's a good answer. But also think about what's going on right now in the age of COVID, right? Obviously, parts of the Disney company are hurting, and so whether it's the movie industry, right, that really can't. The idea of us not being able to go watch movies in the movie theater, which really hurts me. So obviously, that's the movie industry, and to a big extent, is taking a big hit. Although Disney has its streaming service, the theme park industry has taken a big hit, at least in the state of California, because Governor Newsom has decided to shut down the parks, and so that's taken a hit. But other parts of the industry other parts of the company might be doing well, and so therefore it would offset the fact that you're doing poorly in these other different areas. This is why, for instance, I don't know if you guys have any money or if you guys invest any money. So, but if you did talk to an investor and they were going to invest money for you, they would tell you, because you're young, I'm assuming all of you are young, that, oh, because you're young, you should diversify. You should place your money in all these different types of businesses or stocks, because in case one goes down, well, the other one might be going up. Same sort of reason here. So, ESPN, which is doing terrible, is going to be the fact that Disney owns it and it's kind of being hurt financially by ESPN might be compensated by the fact that Marvel's doing great, for instance. So hopefully that's clear. Any questions on what I mean by horizontal integration? Owning different companies at the same level, and it could be either concentrated within one specific industry, where they diversify within one industry, or they diversify non-concentrated, where it's across the entire horizon and they own media across different types of entertainment and tourism sectors. No questions? All right, so point number 2, a lot of these conglomerates try to be vertically integrated. And so vertical integration means controlling production. So P, production. They try to control D, distribution. And they try to control E, exhibition, to be vertically integrated. Now, generally speaking, the courts have frowned upon the idea of being vertically integrated, the idea of controlling content through production, distribution, and exhibition. But since the 80s, they've been more laissez-faire about it. And so it's easier now for a media conglomerate, if they choose to control production, distribution, and exhibition. So for instance, going back to the idea of Disney very easily, besides owning its one theater over there in Hollywood, it could easily, if it wanted to, buy theaters and use them to exhibit its own movies and other movies as well, if they wanted to. But I think theater industry right now might be in some trouble. So again, vertical integration, production, controlling production, distribution, and exhibition. Now, why does a company try to vertically integrate? What would be the rationale?
if they have more control over production and everything else involved, then they can make more profit and they can ensure that the quality of what they put out is what they want it to be.
Yeah, excellent. Yes, they can QC their products better, right? If it's along the chain of command, the quality control, they know exactly what they're doing, and they're vetting or going or checking to see the quality of the content as it makes its way through the company. So yes, generally speaking, it's a better way of trying to control costs, if you can do that. So very good. Synergy. So synergy essentially means companies under the same media conglomerate umbrella try to work together, and they try to work together to generate the biggest buzz possible. So, for instance, going back to Disney, because Disney probably does synergy better than everybody else. Let's just say that a Disney is going to stream a movie, or even whenever the theaters go back to normal, whenever that happens, it's going to be distributed or exhibited in certain theaters. So generally speaking, Disney will advertise the fact that this movie is going to be released. Let's say it's a Marvel movie. A Marvel movie is going to be released at theaters. They're going to use their television network like ABC to promote the fact that Marvel's coming out this particular weekend. They're going to also probably advertise that movie on ESPN or other cable networks that they own to advertise the fact that there's movies going to be coming out. If they own any radio stations, certainly they're going to promote it on their radio stations. If the cruise line industry is coming up, they'll probably promote it on that. So anything that Disney owns, they'll utilize to promote the fact that this new Marvel movie is coming out, because they're trying to get as many people as possible excited about this particular movie. And in order to create the biggest buzz possible, they need to utilize synergy. So again, what that means is using companies under the same umbrella to work together in order to create a big buzz or anticipation. Any questions on synergy and what I mean by synergy? No questions? Okay, so branding. I'm going to read this branding definition because I really like this definition of branding. It's a marketing practice of creating a name, symbol, or design that identifies or differentiates a product from other products. So again, it's a marketing practice of creating a name, a symbol, or design that identifies or differentiates a product from other products. So that's the whole point of branding. Now, what is branding's end goal?
Recognition.
Partially.
Revenue.
True.
Popularity, especially because branding can be used for not only companies, but for individuals, like on social media and in the music and entertainment industry.
Yes, that's partially true as well. Anybody else? Those are partially correct when it comes to the end goal.
Curating an aesthetic and an image.
That's part of the end goal, yes. So the branding's end goal at the end of the day, all of you are correct with what the answers you've said, or at least partially correct. But at the end of the day, the end goal for branding is that a company wants to be able to attract its target audience repeatedly. So at the end of the day, the end goal is that the company wants to attract its target audience repeatedly to its products, right? So again, going back to Disney, not that I want to spend too much time talking about Disney, but who is Disney's target audience?
Families.
So think about how Disney's awesome branding is able to repeatedly attract families to its products repeatedly over and over and over and over again, right? If you think about, Disney's been around since when was this the first movie? Was Steamboat Willie was 1928, I think. So it's almost 100 years old. So, and almost over that period of time, it's been very successful at being able to repeatedly attract its target audience families to its products over and over and over again. So any questions on branding? So windowing is a series of exhibition points. And the reason that they, as some of you already mentioned previously, the reason that you window is to maximize profit. And that's the reason why you windowing. And so it's a series of exhibition points. So traditionally and generally speaking, whenever a media conglomerate, let's say, releases a film, they generally, the first window is the movie theaters, right? And the second window, generally speaking, is used to be home entertainment. It still is, but along with that, it could be streaming. A little bit down the line further, it's retail sales, and then maybe it's airplanes, and then pay-per-views, and then syndication on cable or syndication on networks. So that's an example of windows. It's a series of exhibition points where a movie, in this case, is released in all these different types of conduits or mediums. And so again, it's a way for a media conglomerate like a Disney or a Universal or a Warner Brothers to maximize profit. Because think about it, right? A movie, maybe even a television program, but especially a movie, it's one of the few things that you watch over and over again, um, in different mediums, whether it's maybe watching it in the movie theater, maybe you buy a home entertainment disc, maybe you stream it, maybe you watch it online, maybe you decide to do a pay-per-view, whatever. And so you can watch it in different forms or different ways over a period of time. And generally speaking, a media conglomerate is going to window it. So in other words, maybe the first 6 weeks, it's only going to be movie theaters. And then after that, it might be, home entertainment for 2 weeks where um, they don't, let's say it's streaming or something like that. And then 2 weeks later, you can do a buy through or buy at a retail store, because nowadays, or at least they used to have a rule where Walmart couldn't get the home entertainment disc at the same time as, um, oh no, Netflix couldn't get the disc at the same time as retail stores. So they used to have to delay like things like Netflix 15 days as part of the windowing to maximize profit. And then last but not least is financial muscle. So financial muscle, essentially, I'm referring to the fact that these media conglomerates, right, it costs a lot of money to produce content. It costs a lot of money to promote content. It certainly costs a lot of money to distribute content, and then also to be able to absorb losses occasionally, like the loss of, let's say, a major revenue stream like the movie theaters. And so you have to have the financial muscle to be able to absorb all this and to undertake all this. And so this is why there's only, there's only a handful really of gigantic media conglomerates that operate, at least here in the United States. So any questions on the characteristics of a media conglomerate moving forward? No questions?
So, just to clarify, the financial muscle basically is just kind of like how well they can manage their ability to spend money on promotion and take losses.
Their ability to spend money, exactly. Well, you got to think about, especially a movie studio, as being a bank. They lend money to movie producers so they can make content. And they're lending them money like a bank, and the studio is going to charge you interest like a bank um, on their investment. So they operate a lot like a bank, and so they have to have the financial muscle to spend, let's say, um, you know, $200 million to make a Marvel movie, and on top of that, if they're doing a theatrical release, spend another $100 million doing the promotion and distribution of the content, which is about, generally speaking, it's about 50% whatever they spend on the production budget. So, I mean, that's $350 million, or no, it's $300 million, I should say, on spending money on content where they haven't even made a penny yet. It's all sunk costs, as they refer to it. And so they have to have the financial muscle to absorb. It's spending that kind of money, not knowing the kind of return you're going to get. And not only that, but then let's just say that Marvel movie bombs for whatever reason. At some point in time, I think a Marvel movie will bomb. I don't know when that's going to happen. But let's just say that, nobody went because you got tired of watching Marvel movies, and let's say they made $1 million. And they spent $300 million to produce and to distribute and promote and distribute. Well, guess what? Disney can absorb that. They can, okay, we just took a $299 million loss. Okay, let's keep moving forward. Not many companies can absorb those kind of losses and still continue. And I mean, granted, even Disney would be immensely hurt by that, and they couldn't do it for many of their movies, but they could take an occasional hit like that once in a while.
Thank you.
All right. So, any other questions, folks? All right. So we went on to the pestle. So the pestle is a good way of sort of examining the current terrain for an organization. So when you're writing your final paper, a big chunk of your paper is going to be doing a pestle. And so when you start writing your final paper, please refer back to the pestle because it's going to answer your questions in terms of like, how should I go about tackling this question when I'm writing my final research paper on Disney or whatever it is that you're going to be writing a final paper on. And so the first thing you want to think about is political. What is the industry's lobbying effort? So you have to really pay attention to trade organizations. So whether it's the RIAA for the music industry or the MPAA for, let's just say, for the movie industry, or let's just say it's the ESA for the video game industry. Who are they lobbying? What are they lobbying for? You got to pay attention to that. So for example, let me give you an example here. So pay attention. I'm going to play this clip on Mickey Mouse and copyright. So part of this video is going to center on lobbying, which is political, and part of it's going to center on how copyright law has changed over the years. That's legal. So, but for this particular example, pay close attention. Well, all of it, but especially the part on the lobbying.
One of the world's most recognizable characters, Mickey Mouse, is also one of the driving forces behind copyright law, specifically how long copyrights can last for. Almost all pop culture that came before Mickey, The Yellow Kid, Huckleberry Finn, Charlie Chaplin's movies, are in the public domain. But everything after, Goofy, Bugs Bunny, the Ninja Turtles, Luke Skywalker, as long as Mickey stays protected, they're protected as well, as long as they exercise their renewal options. Back when Mickey first appeared in 1928's Steamboat Willie, copyright gave creators rights to their work for 28 years, along with an option to renew for another 28. After that time passed, creative works would enter the public domain, free for anyone to use. Based on that law, the world's most famous mouse should have entered the public domain in 1984. Obviously, that never happened. In 1976, with 8 years left on the Mickey copyright and under significant pressure from Disney, Congress passed a new Copyright Act. Part of the act established that if a work was not yet in the public domain and still protected under the old law, its copyright protection now lasted 75 years instead of 56. Under that new law, the copyright on Mickey Mouse would now expire in 2003. However, in the mid-90s, Disney began to heavily lobby Congress to extend the law even more. Then CEO Michael Eisner was even spotted at the offices of various congressmen. He was very much interested in seeing the copyright bill. I think we need to do it. I agree with him. Then House Speaker Trent Lott would later say of Eisner in an interview with Congressional Quarterly. And in 1998, with only 5 years left on the rights to Mickey, Congress passed and President Clinton signed the Copyright Term Extension Act. The new act extended copyrights even more. If something was made in 1923 or after and still protected by copyright in 1998, it would not enter the public domain until 2019 or later. One law professor we spoke with, Christopher Sprigman at NYU, told us that, quote, traditionally the Walt Disney Company has been very good at convincing Congress to do what they want, end quote. As recently as 2008, brand experts estimated Mickey's value to the Walt Disney Company at $3 billion. With only 8 years left on Disney's Mickey rights, there's a good chance a new bill could appear in Congress in the next few years. After all, it's in the interest of anyone holding a copyright, Warner Brothers, Viacom, NBC Universal, to never let the term on Disney's mouse expire. As goes Mickey, so goes everything else. The irony in all this? A multitude of Disney's biggest hits, Cinderella, Pinocchio, Aladdin, and many others, were all adapted from the public domain.
Yes, that is ironic. I think the Grimm brothers, they adapted a lot of stuff from the Grimm brothers. Anyway, so that, as you can see here, because Disney lobbied or successfully lobbied the government, they were able to get an extension on their copyrights. So that would be an example of a lobbying effort. Another thing to think about, let's just say that the president or Congress is behaving in a fashion that the industry feels like it's going to hurt them. In that particular case, right, the company or the industry might lobby or ask a favor, right, from the politicians. So, for example, I don't remember if you guys remember the terrible mass shooting that took place, I think in, oh gosh, it was in, I think it was in El Paso. And so President Trump, former President Trump, had a press conference where he critiqued the video game industry. And so I'm certainly sure that the video game industry probably contacted some senators or Congress people and probably said, hey, can you please talk to the president, and so he's not so critical of our industry, that sort of thing. What else can I say about this point? Other things to think about how Disney and the other amusement park companies in the state of California have been asking, for instance, Governor Newsom to open up its parks again. That's another example of political. An example of what could be local. Anytime you want to build, let's say, a park, let's say, like in this case, a venue. Let's say the people over that built the SoFi Stadium, this beautiful stadium that I think they spent like $5 billion to build over in Inglewood. Think about the kind of relationships the owner of the stadium has to have with the local government and the state government to get that stadium even built. So those are examples of political. There's politics in everything. Can't escape it. So economics, what's the current state of the economy? This is where when you're doing your pestle and you're writing your final paper, you kind of have to take a look at the current state of the economy, right? So obviously, if we're writing about the movie industry, it's not doing as well because the theaters have been shut down for quite a long time. If you're doing, let's say, a paper on Netflix, well, I'm assuming that Netflix is probably doing well, even with Disney Plus emerging as a competitor, because more of us are streaming content. And so the other things to think about are the unemployment rates, which unfortunately because of COVID have gone up. Disposable income seems like it's going down because unemployment rates are going up. So therefore disposable income is going down. Consumer spending is probably also going to go down since unemployment has gone up. So pay attention to the current economy in terms of what's going on. Sometimes what some states will do in terms of economically speaking to bring jobs to their particular state, they will oftentimes have tax rebates. And so the state of Texas or the state of Louisiana or the state of Georgia might give some rebates, so that way film production or television production ends up moving to that particular state and leaving the state of California. And so that's economic. So let me see if I have an example of that. Let's see if I have one. Oh, this is a good example. Okay.
Tax credits are offered by most states and various cities as incentives to attract film and TV production. They keep production in America and create thousands of jobs outside of the industry. What kinds of jobs? All kinds. Mostly good middle-class jobs for stagehands, lighting technicians, camera operators, construction workers, and set designers. Local businesses also depend on active film and television production, including caterers, dry cleaners, and trucking companies, just to name a few. We talked to some folks who were working on an untitled Judd Apatow film in Los Angeles to find out why they think tax credits are so important to the local economy.
Tax credits means jobs. It's pretty simple. I've shot in Michigan and in Georgia. They have tax credits. I did my first out-of-town jobs in the last 10 years. I did 2 out of the last 3 jobs, and it was because of tax credits in other states.
They're instrumental in keeping productions here in the state. There's been a rash of productions leaving California due to other states' incentive programs, and without California's program, there would be far fewer films that do stay here.
The tax credits, as how it impacts catering in the movie industry, it's so widespread that people really don't have a clue. Personally, when I have to secure provisions for the movie crew, it provides employment and revenue for many vendors: meat, produce, a daily shop, groceries, so forth and so on. To that end, it also means that, you know, the drivers that work for these different companies stay employed, and it snowballs. I mean, it's widespread.
What I see is a future with the system as it is, with other states maintaining their tax credits and California not really matching it. We're going to lose beyond jobs. We're going to lose our tax base. People are going to move. First thing crew members do in every location is, how much is this house? And when we're in other states, we walk into houses and go, wow, this is nice. How much is this house? And everybody's reaction is the same. How much? How much are they paying for this? Can't believe how inexpensive it is.
My guys that have worked for me for, 8 to 12 years have families, and young families. And it's really asking a lot of them, puts a great deal of strain on the family for them to have to leave town and leave their wives and children. So, keeping work in California is good for everyone, for the industry as well as for the individual.
So that's a good example of economic and how some states are utilizing tax credits. The way it works, generally speaking, for if you want to get a tax credit in a different state, let's say like Texas, is that you have to shoot a certain percentage of the film in Texas. And I do believe that you have to hire a certain number of people that reside in Texas in order to get these rebates. That's a big trend right now in the movie industry, is that this idea of shooting in different locations outside of the state of California, because the state of California is really expensive. So which kind of bleeds over into the social cultural, just in terms of geographic shifts. You guys, well, let me ask the question. Do you think California's population is growing or is it shrinking right now?
Shrinking.
Anybody else?
Shrinking?
Shrinking, you're right. Going back to the point that the individual said in the video, the cost of living in other places throughout the country is much cheaper. I mean, yes, we have lovely weather here, right? Most of the year. And so there's a price to pay for this weather. And so that price is really expensive. And so other parts of the country, it's much more affordable. And so there's a lot of folks that are leaving the state of California. And they're moving to different states. A lot of them are moving to Texas. I've had like 3 friends just recently moved to Texas. A lot of them are moving to Arizona and Nevada and other places like Colorado. And so there is sort of a geographic shift, not only just taking place from people leaving the state of California and going to other southwestern states, but you also have a lot of people who are or were leaving the Rust Belt. Does everybody know what I mean by the Rust Belt? Nobody knows what I mean by the Rust Belt. Anybody? So the Rust Belt is essentially, let's see. No, the Rust Belt essentially it's the upper it's the upper tier states in our country. So it's like Michigan, Ohio, uh, I think Wisconsin is considered this, Minnesota, Indiana, those states up there, upper Midwest. So a lot of people are actually leaving the upper Midwest and moving south as well. So there's a geographic shift in terms of population or the people moving to. And so that's one thing you have to pay attention to when you're writing your paper. There's also obviously demographic shifts just in terms of race and ethnicity. Our country is becoming, immensely diverse, ethnically, racially. It's very, very diverse. You guys, or you guys and ladies, are going to be. I think your generation is, I believe, the most diverse generation in the history of the United States, and even the generation that follows you guys is going to be even more diverse, and so, which is a good thing in my opinion. And so, how does that impact the industry moving forward, right? So one of the things that you do see, especially in movies and in television, is this idea that people want to see themselves on screen, and so there's been a sort of a push in terms of diversifying the talent that appears on screen. And so, if you're Latino or Asian or whatever, you want to see yourself on screen, and there's a push to see that on screen, because it doesn't, what we see on screen for many years doesn't reflect our society really. And then what are some cultural trends in terms of like who are, what is the most popular genre of music? Who are the movie stars? Who are the great musical acts? Who's the popular, I don't know, podcaster? Who are the influential folks right now in society? Those are cultural trends. Um, Land is super cheap. And a lot of people are also leaving. Question here is, why are people moving southbound to from the northern states? A lot of the northern states, they call it the Rust Belt because historically they used to make products that are not obsolete but just older, right? I mean, like cars and those sorts of things, iron. This idea of working, 9 to 5, blue collar job, those sorts of jobs have been leaving the country for quite a long time now, generally for other parts of the world, because they can pay, generally speaking, pay those employees less money. And so they've been leaving the country. This has been going on for a while. So that's one of the reasons why people are leaving that part of the country. Technology. So how does technology affect your business in terms of like, think about piracy, because we're able to stream content online. That's good in some regards, but it also makes it a lot easier to pirate content. So The Mandalorian, for instance, I think it's the most pirated show right now. I'm not sure if somebody can please fact check that for me. I'm not sure, but I do want to say that The Mandalorian right now is the most pirated television program. I know for a period of time, the Game of Thrones was the most pirated. The point that I'm trying to make is because we're able to stream, it's very easy to pirate. And so that's a problem. Um, how do people consume content? Because we're able to stream technologically speaking, where a lot of you no longer have cable or have gotten rid of your cable. So, for instance, there's three different categories of people well, who either used cable for a period of time or don't even know what cable is, right? There's the people who never had cable, of course, for instance. There's the people who are cable shavers. In other words, they used to have, let's say, HBO and Showtime and other things, and they decided to just get rid of all those channels and shave everything. And then there's, of course, there's the cord cutters that decided, well, it's too much money. I'd rather just stream my content than having cable. And I just got rid of cable altogether. And so think about how people are now, different ways that we're consuming content. It was true. Oh, okay. And so technological costs. Anytime you introduce more technology into products, it makes it, generally speaking, more expensive. So, for instance, let's say making a 3D film. So that's going to require the filmmaker to utilize more technology, which, generally speaking, raises the cost of, let's say, making a movie. Uh, Patent life cycles, the stage. Sometimes you control patents and sometimes you don't. And so if you don't, you got to pay a royalty for the patent life cycle. Patents, I believe, depending on the type of patent that you have, it's either 15 or 20 years in terms of what is the patent. What's the internet infrastructure like? Is it good? Is it bad? So one of the things, let's say, for instance, Netflix has to deal with, since they're going global, and this is going to be the same. This is the same issue that Disney Plus is dealing with. Amazon has to deal with it as well. Is that some countries have a great internet infrastructure and they're able to stream content very easily and very well. And then there's other countries that don't have, a great internet infrastructure, and it cuts out, right? And so that's an issue for for countries that are trying to go global, let's say like a Netflix or an Amazon or a Disney Plus. They're affected by the quality or the lack of quality of that technology. Let's see, what else am I going to talk about here? So the last two of the pestle is the legal. What are the current laws that are affecting your business? So, for instance, current FCC rules. So, for instance, I think one of the big rules that in my opinion, hurts network TV when it comes to them competing against specialty channels or premium channels like HBO or Showtime, or heck, even competing against, Amazon or Netflix is, you know, Showtime or HBO or Netflix or heck, even Disney Plus. Any of these, you can say whatever you want. Generally speaking, there is no FCC. FCC doesn't regulate the content. Unlike network TV, the writers have to be very careful about what they say. Otherwise, they're going to get into trouble. For instance, there's the copyright laws. What are they? Not every single country has the same copyright laws that we do. What are the trademark laws that are going on? Again, not every country even honors trademarks like we do. Local permits. So when it comes to, let's say, doing a special event, you need a local permit. For instance, if you're going to block off a sidewalk, you need to get a permit from the city grants you permission to block the sidewalks. For instance, if you're going to use porta potties, you have to get a special local permit from the city to use porta potties. All those sorts of things fall under the legal. There's city zoning laws in terms of like where you can do what. Again, this applies more to special events. And then there's also city zone restrictions. So I don't know if any of you have ever been to like the Greek Theater, for instance, over in Los Angeles. I think it's still called the Greek. And so if you've ever been there, I know when I first went there many, many years ago, they stopped the concert like right at 10 o'clock. And I'm like, what the heck's going on? Turns out that there's a noise restriction law in place for that neighborhood. And so concerts can't go on beyond, I believe, 10 o'clock. They have to stop. So that's a legal issue. So are there any pending mergers within the industry? And remember, anytime you sign a contract, it's a binding deal. It's legal. It falls under legal. And environmental. Are there any environmental issues that might affect your business, like i.e. pollution, over tourism, new energy sources? So most of these major media conglomerates are using some sort of like, they're introducing some sort of green program to try to reduce pollution or waste. Maybe they're adopting solar or wind or something like that. So what's going on environmentally speaking within that industry? What is your company doing if you're going to be focusing on a specific company? Let's say like Disney theme parks. I'm sure Disney's doing something to try to reduce its impact on the environment, for instance. So any questions on the pestle? So it's very important that you understand the pestle because that's essentially going to be like what 60% of your grade when it comes to writing your final paper. Yes, we're talking about your final paper in lecture number 1. No questions? All right, so copyrights. Copyrights are immensely important because this is a way for the publisher or the owner of the copyright to actually monetize the actual product. Otherwise, if there was no way of monetizing it, what would be the point of owning a copyright? Anyway, it's anytime you see a symbol, it says, you see the C with the circle, be careful. You don't want to copy it. It's because it's copywritten. So public domain obviously means that has no copyright. It means the copyright's expired. So who can use products or content that is in public domain? Anybody? Who can use it?
Anybody.
Anybody, right. So the strength is anybody can use it. And of course, the weakness is anybody can use it. So public domain essentially means it's the Wild West. Anybody can have access to it. So let's just talk about some of these older copyright acts. So the first Copyright Act, or 1790, was one of the early copyright acts. The copyright was only for 14 years. Now, you could extend it for another 14 years, so that's 28, but the person had to be alive. And they had to want to extend it. So again, Copyright Act, 1790, 14 years, and it was an additional 14 years if the person was alive, and of course, if they also wanted to renew it. So the maximum number of years for a copyright in 1790 was 28 years. The Copyright Act of 1909, if you're paying attention to the video, hopefully you were, as they said, the copyright was 28 years. Now, in this particular case, it didn't matter if you were dead or alive. You had the option or your estate had the option to renew the copyright. So the maximum copyright under the Copyright Act of 1909 was 56 years. So 28 plus 28 if you wanted to renew it. Now, sometimes, some copyright holders didn't want to renew it. So it's very possible, right, that let's just say you had a movie that came out in 1909, very possibly you could have said, I don't want to renew it. And so that copyright could have ended in 1938. All right, so prior to the Copyright Act of 1976, a copyright could have lasted anywhere from 28 to 95 years. So if a copyright for a work prior to 1964 may have ended after 28 years, even though they kind of were in many cases could have been grandfathered into a newer Copyright Act, Copyright Act law. And so again, copyright for works prior to January 1st, 1964 ended after 28 years, unless they decided to renew it, the copyright holder. Now, this is where it gets a little tricky. So copyrights for works between January 1st, 1964 to December 31st, 1977 received an automatic extension. So the automatic extension went from 28 years to 95. So I believe this happened, I believe it was in 1992 they decided to do this. But anyways, I believe it was 1992. So anyways, these works now have copyrights of 95 years. And this, again, happened to works that were released or published before the Copyright Act of 1976 took hold. Because really, the Copyright Act of 1976 really didn't, even though they called it the Copyright Act of 1976, didn't really kick in until 1978. So has everybody got that? That the copyrights for works between 1964, January of 64, to December of 77 received an extension of 67 years, and essentially the term of their copyright went from 28 years to 95. Just automatically. And I believe this happened in 1992 when they decided to do this. No questions?
So as the video stated, these new laws were enacted because the company Disney had a heavy influence on politics. Because I guess the video said that Disney would go to Congress and have them reinstate this law. So was Disney responsible for the 19, no, sorry. So was Disney like responsible after like they copyrighted Mickey, like for those extension dates?
They played a big role in it, yes.
And why is it that a company had that much influence on Congress?
They paid them a lot of money.
Oh, so kind of a little bit corrupt?
It's legal. There's nothing corrupt about it. I mean, it kind of reduces our definition of what is a democracy, because you're paying for favors, but it's legal.
I feel like it's legal, but I feel like when companies have that much influence in politics, it's a scary thing.
Yes, I agree. It's not ethical, but it's legal.
All right, thank you.
No, it sucks, right? So again, copyright works for works between January 1st through December 31st, 1977 received an automatic extension from the copyright folks, I believe. I don't know whoever did that. They extended their copyright from 28 years to 95 years. So they essentially got a 67-year extension on their copyrights. And again, this was done prior to the implementation of the Copyright Act of 1976. which didn't really kick in until 1978. So right now we're essentially operating under the Copyright Act of 1976, even though there's been revisions done to it, even more so. We'll talk about the impact that Disney had even on the next slide. But anyways, the Copyright Act of 1976 is important. That really kicked in 78 because it really wrote down, really set down some tangible rules in terms of what was protected under the Copyright Act. It hadn't really been done prior to this. So it protects intellectual property, i.e. creations of the mind. Now, those creations of the mind have to be creative, right? And this is where it gets a little bit tricky. And so you just can't copyright anything, in other words. And so it has to be creations of the mind, and it also has to be, creative. Yes. Clinton, you pay the Library of Congress. So any of you can copyright anything that you have right now. Let's say you're writing a script, and you would pay a fee to the Library of Congress, and they will copyright it for you. So these copyrights, yes, are paid for.
I have a quick question. This might sound very ignorant, but I think I'm a little confused because doesn't Disney own Mickey? Because Walt Disney created Mickey, so why would they need a copyright?
Because the Copyright Act said you only had rights to that image or rights to that copyright for a certain number of years.
Okay, thank you.
And so it defined works of authorship. So copyright defined works of authorships like literary works. So like, for instance, a book would fall under a work of authorship. Musical works, like whether it's writing the notes or the lyrics, right? That falls under works of authorship. A motion picture falls under a work of authorship. A script, right, whether it's for television or for movies, falls under works of authorship. So again, the Copyright Act of 1976 really put it down in a very tangible way, what exactly was protected under a copyright. And it really was for the most part, for entertainment at least, in movies, TV, music, the real first copyright that really had teeth to it, much more so than the Copyright Act of 1909. And so it also codified fair use. So in other words, you could use, let's say, clips of a movie for educational purposes. So it set forth what exactly falls under fair use. So in theory, right, although this doesn't really work in many cases, when I put up a lecture on YouTube, I could claim to YouTube that it's fair use because it's educational purposes. I'm not making any money off my lecture. And so therefore, if I use a clip of a movie, I should be fine. I shouldn't have any issues. But that being said, my lecture could get flagged by YouTube or get flagged by the intellectual property owner. And they could flag an enforcement to take down that video, for instance. Even though it's quote unquote fair use. Can you copyright a YouTube video? That's a good question. I'm pretty sure you can. Yes, my initial answer, I've never tried to copyright a YouTube video, but my initial inclination is yes, you can. As long as it's your original piece of work. So it has to be creative and original. Okay, so, and I'll just finish this slide before my time is up. So it also grants exclusive rights to copyright holders to copy, perform, distribute, and profit off their content. So, right, the site, one of the idea of copyrights is that in order to really reward people for their creativity, it's important to have copyrights so the copyright holders actually profit off of these creative works. Because if it was just the Wild West where anybody can just copy anything and they couldn't monetize it or profit off of it, there'd be less incentive to produce creative content. So some people argue against that, but there's a reasonable argument for or against. Now there's also been a term extension on top of the Copyright Act of 1976, which is the Sonny Bono term extension, because late Congressman Sonny Bono was one of the people who really pushed this act through. Some people refer to this, going back to the power of Disney, as the Mickey Mouse Protection Act, which again extended the copyrights yet again. And so now for a single author or just a regular person like any of you, I know somebody just mentioned, I just checked the chat, somebody mentioned that they actually copyrighted their songs. So Shelby copyrighted her song. I don't know when she copyrighted her song. Yesele, I'm not 100% sure. I do think they're separate, but I'm not 100% sure on copyrighting music. But I think the lyrics and composition are considered separate. But anyways, I don't know when Shelby copyrighted her songs before. Let's just say that she copyrighted her song in 2020. And during the holiday season, she felt creative. And so the copyright would be for a lifetime, for however many years Shelby lives, plus 70 years. Does that make sense? So author is lifetime plus 70 years. So if Shelby lives to be the age of 100, let's just say Shelby's 20. Shelby's 20 right now. She lives to be 100. It's 80 years plus 70. So lifetime plus 70 years. Now, for a company, let's say it's a corporate author like a Disney or a Universal or a Warner Brothers, it's 120 years from creation or 95 years from publication, whichever expires first. Now, you might say, well, what does that mean? Why the different dates? Sometimes the studios will create content. Let's say like they'll write a script, they'll have a writer write a script, and they'll just put it in the vault and they'll just keep it there for a while. And so they may not even take it out of the vault until many years later, right? So they might publish it, 15 or 20 years after that. So again, so 100, so that's why you have different, because 120 years from creation or publication, because again, you might create something, or the studios, and they may not do anything with it. And so they might publish it many years later. So whatever expires first, 120 years or from creation or 95 years from publication. And that's considered a corporate authorship. One last thing before I conclude my lecture, because we're already 3 minutes over. There's the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, which is done in 1998. And so this is try to tackle internet piracy that goes on online. And so Congress developed laws to try to prevent companies from circumventing what they call DRMs. So DRMs are known as digital rights management, DRMs, digital rights management. So any company that produces content, they put it up online, they have their DRM, their digital rights management. In other words, how do they want their content utilized? And so if anybody decides to circumvent the company's digital rights management, let's say that they decide to pirate it without their permission, the Digital Rights Copyright Act comes down hard on these websites or these organizations. So some people point to this act as being one of the reasons why Napster, for instance, I don't know if you guys remember Napster, got taken down because of this particular act. Some people point to this.